Hello and welcome to Edit My Photo. This image submitted by Amanda is really lovely, but it needs a bit of work to brighten up this trainee service dog and even out the dappled light. We also need to remove the leash and bring focus to the dog. Feel free to follow along from start to finish or fast track through the tutorial using the chapter links below. As always, if you like the video, please subscribe to this channel for more pet photography shooting and editing tips and tricks. Hi, I'm Turner-Bullock from Unleashed Education, and you've tuned in to another episode of Edit My Photo. We run these challenges monthly in the Unleashed Education membership, and they go through a few different stages. Firstly, I submit one of my raw images for members to download and edit. I took this photo of Tabasco the Border Collie up in the gorgeous Port Hills over Christchurch City. This was taken on my Fujifilm GFX 50S, and the goal for this edit was to bring out the incredible amount of detail that lives in these medium format RAW files. It was a great opportunity for members to play with this file, as most have never had access to medium format cameras like the Fujifilm GFX before. Aside from bringing out all the detail, the rest of the edit was up to them. I was blown away by the variety in the edits that were submitted, and out of all the submissions, I chose Amanda's as my favourite. I love how she toned the image, and this is one of the best sky replacements I have ever seen as well. Amanda matched the tonality, direction of light and depth of field really well, and flawlessly masked Tabasco's hair to create a gorgeous and believable edit. In the second part of the challenge, the winner gets to select one of their images and I will edit it for them. Amanda submitted this raw image of a service dog in training. The image was shot under dappled shade, so I'm going to try and even out the lighting a little bit and focus on a simple edit that brings attention to this service dog. Make sure you watch until the end so you can see the finished results, and as always, your questions and feedback are welcome in the comments. Okay, so I'm here in Lightroom with Amanda's RAW file. We can see from the EXIF data that it was shot on a Nikon D750 and the 70-200 2.8 lens. The settings for the exposure were 1/2000th of a second at f3.2, 86mm focal length and ISO 250. This is a really great focal length and aperture to give the subject a little bit of separation from the background, which is exactly what has happened here with this beautiful little service dog in training. And Amanda's handled the exposure really well. She's dealing with some dappled shade here and carefully exposed so that none of the highlights have been blown out, and we've still got plenty of detail to pull from the shadows. So I'm going to have a play with the adjustments now and just lift those shadows a little bit and bring back some detail into the image. Okay, so what I've done in the basic adjustments panel here is lifted the shadows and brought down the highlights just so I get some more detail in the dog. I've raised the whites and brought down the blacks, which will have the opposite effect of the highlights and shadows adjustments and just bring some contrast back into the image. If you're raising and lowering these two quite a lot, which I've done, you can end up with quite a flat image, so I've compensated for that with the two adjustments in the whites and blacks. I've given the image a little bit of clarity and dehaze, as well as a little bit of vibrance and saturation. Once I've made those adjustments, I go back to the white balance and I corrected this. I've warmed this up quite a bit. As you can see, this dog is mostly in the shade, so the dog's fur was quite cool. So I've warmed up that, and I've brought up the tint a little bit as well because it was looking a little bit green, which again, shadows and kind of cooler light can go a little bit green in your edits. And I've then raised the exposure a little bit as well. The next thing I'm going to do is finish off the global adjustments with some details and lens corrections. So I've just sharpened the image a little bit there. I've masked the sharpening, which you can do with the Option key and bring in the masking. So basically I've raised that until all I'm seeing is the edges of the dog being sharpened. I've ticked the Remove Chromatic Aberration box, which I tend to always do on all of my edits just in case there is any. Although sometimes if the CA is particularly bad, you might have to remove it manually. And then I've also added a little bit of saturation to the blue primary in the calibration area. I find that this just gives a nice little pop of colour to the images, and I do that quite a lot with most of my edits. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the brushes and the filters here to make some local adjustments on the image before I then take it into Photoshop to do some finishing touches. All I've done there is just lifted the exposure in the shadow areas and brought the exposure down in the highlighted areas a little bit. So I think at this stage that's about all I need to do in Lightroom. So now I'm going to take it into Photoshop. I'll deal with this leash, we'll make the eyes sparkle a little bit more and make a few other adjustments, and I will talk to you about what I've done there in a moment. So the first thing I want to do here is remove the leash, and we also have to remember to deal with this shadow from the leash as well. To do that, I'm going to use the patch tool and Content Aware Fill. So first of all, I'll duplicate this layer with Command and J, zoom in a little bit closer, and we will make these little leashes disappear. So you keep holding down Shift, you can add to the selection that you're making here, and Option will subtract from the selection. I think that's okay for now. I'll deal with these little bits separately if I can. So now I'll try and work on the tags and the clips. And as I suspected, I've got to clean up this edge a little bit. We can do that with the clone stamp, and I'm at a 47% opacity already, and I think that that's probably okay. Maybe I'll take the hardness of the brush up though, so we get a more solid line. Looking pretty good there. So I think next I just want to take a couple of the little distractions off of the ground, like this leaf here. I'm actually leaving this piece of ice just because it's just adding to the story of the image where, you know, obviously it's been snowing or something like that, so there's some residue ice and snow left over before it's melted. So I'm going to duplicate this layer again. I actually think we can put more light into the dog's face still, so I'm going to make an adjustment with curves. So Command and M is your curve shortcut. Raise that up slightly, and then if I press Command and I, that will invert my layer, and I can go to the brush tool with B, make sure it's a white brush, and then we can just bring the lightness to the shadows on the face. I'm going to merge those two layers now with Command and E, duplicate it again, And I think what I've probably done is lightened up his nose a little bit too much. So I'm going to do the opposite there, bring the exposure down on a curves layer and brush that back on to darken it slightly. Just a couple of little bits that are catching my eye. This little bit of snow, and these 2 or 3 little pieces here. So I'll get rid of those. Now I'll work on giving a little bit of extra sparkle to her eyes. So duplicate this layer. I will do a curves adjustment to lighten, and I will give it some saturation. Mask that again and just paint it on the coloured parts of the eyes. I'll merge that down, duplicate again, bring the exposure down a little bit and paint on the pupils just to darken the pupils back down. I don't want to paint over the catch lights, I do still want those to be nice and light. And then final adjustment here is filter high pass, and we'll sharpen it. So I usually use the high pass filter at around 8 pixels. Depends on the image, but you want it to be clear on the eyes. So to blend that, we are going to soft light, and it's same thing again. We're going to mask that and paint it onto the eyes. If you're part of the Unleashed Education membership, I do have some Photoshop actions that will do this for you, and then you just need to do the brushing. And then on this layer you can just play with the opacity just to bring the sharpness to the level that you want. You don't want to overdo the eyes and make them start looking unrealistic or a little bit creepy or anything like that. Okay, so then my final adjustment in here is just going to be adding a little bit of texture to the fur. So to do that, I'm doing the same thing really. I'm doing a high pass filter, changing the blending mode, and just masking in the areas that I want to add the texture to. Now ordinarily in a portrait image I would want to get rid of the harness, but this is a service dog and these dogs always wear their harnesses, especially when they're working or as this dog is in training. So I definitely don't want to get rid of that in this case because it shows what she is and what she's doing. So what I might do in the final stage is just tidy that up a little bit so it just looks a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to use a spot healing brush and get rid of a couple of these extra hairs. I think that's about all we need to do in Photoshop, so I'm going to take it back into Lightroom now, just saving the image, and I will just put my final touches on there. So what I'd like to do now is just make sure that the focus of this image is on the dog. So I'm going to use a gradient filter just to bring some darkness back to the top of the image and bring out a little bit more detail in the sky. So I'm just adjusting the exposure and the dehaze slider for that. Because it's gone a little green, so I'm playing with the white balance now too. This area in the middle here has also got some slightly bright highlights. I'll bring those down just with the highlight slider. Then press O to bring up the mask overlay. And I want to brush away anything falling onto the dog. So click brush, erase, auto mask, and I'll clean this a little bit up here. So my final touches there were just bringing up a little bit more shadow into the foreground with the gradient tool, and adding a vignette as well just to bring the exposure down around the dog. And I think that I'm pretty happy with that edit. I think we've lightened up the dog to even the dappled light out quite nicely, and we've given the image a warm colour that matches the time of the day that it looks like this image was photographed.
Hi, it's me again. If you're wondering how you can get involved in these challenges, it's really easy. You just need to be a member of Unleashed Education, a pet photography education membership created by myself, Craig Turner-Bullock, and the absolutely incredible Charlotte Reeves, Australia's finest pet photographer. Between us, we've had 34 years of experience working as professional pet photographers. Along with this monthly Edit My Photo challenge, the membership also includes access to all of our premium pet photography courses, educational videos, ebooks, guest artist videos, editing tutorials, 3 monthly live calls, and of course a private members-only Facebook community. Through the membership, Charlotte and I share all of our best shooting and editing education, everything you need to become a better pet photographer, plus stacks of inspiration packaged up in a really awesome little community. Charlotte and I would love to have you join us in the membership, and if you'd like to find out more, check out the link in the description.